That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, please hear me out on this one. I know a lot of people are going to get upset with this video. I understand that a lot of people are not going to agree with me, and I would love to hear your opinion in the comment section. But to be completely honest, I mean, I definitely came in here with my biases. I mean, everybody knows I love Trey Lance, hate Justin Fields. Everybody knows that by now. But I want to dive a little bit deeper, and I try to stay as neutral as possible in our evaluation of these rookie quarterbacks, their rookie seasons, and how we should be using said seasons to project going forward. Now, of course, if there is anything that you think I focused in unfairly on, if there's anything you think I did to skew the perception of one of these quarterbacks, which is entirely possible. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I didn't like Justin Fields last year. So maybe I'm just trying to find any reason that I can say, told you so, still sell him. We don't want anything to do with him. Maybe I'm being that guy and I don't want to. So please, like I said, if you feel like I am being unfair in my evaluation and I am cherry picking stats, I would love to know those opinions. But in reality, I don't think so. In reality, I think that we have done a very fair job looking at these rookie quarterbacks. And I've had a lot of people reaching out to me on Patreon saying, you know what, Mason, if you're going to be this low on Justin Fields, you need to be low on Trevor Lawrence as well. You know what, Mason, if you're going to be this low on both those quarterbacks, you need to be low on Zach Wilson. And I would argue that that's a very strong point. I mean, I almost completely agree with you in that sentiment, because you look at all three rookie seasons from each quarterback and really none of them were that great. I know a lot of people want to make the argument, well, Zach Wilson had a very tough schedule, going up against New England twice, going up against Buffalo twice, yada, yada, yada. I'm not going to be diving in to that. I think that we need to be taking a step back. We need to really not try to find excuses for each one of these quarterbacks, which a lot of them have very valid excuses. You had Justin Fields with Matt Nagy. You had Trevor Lawrence with Urban freaking Meyer. So I'm right there with you. There are a lot of reasons that went into these quarterbacks failing, but the fact is they did fail. I mean, if we're going to go just quarterback by quarterback here, and you know what? Davis Mills is not going to be in this data set, because if you begin to introduce second round, third round, fourth round, fifth round, sixth round quarterbacks into a sample, it's going to skew everything, because 90% of those quarterbacks are never going to see the NFL field. So everything we're going to be talking about here will be first round QBs. But I do want to bring Davis Mills up just as an example to compare to these other quarterbacks in Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, and Zach Wilson. And if we look at Davis Mills this past season, 16 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. That's not everything. He does go out there and, more importantly, has 6.4 for his adjusted yards per pass attempt, which is highly predictive going forward, as we will discuss just 1 second. And then if you're looking at his yards per game, 205, nothing special, playing on the Houston Texans. I think if you want to come out and make excuses for Justin Fields, who had Allen Robinson, who had Darnell Mooney, come on. Can we not make even stronger excuses for Davis Mills? I think you can make the argument that Davis Mills was in the worst situation of any one of these quarterbacks, but that's not going to be the point here. And I don't want to be using that as a strong argument against any one of these options. Just as a baseline, Thomas, let's throw these Davis Mills stats up and let's compare them to what we have with some of these other guys. Zach Wilson, obviously second overall pick in this past year's NFL draft, comes out 9 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. 179 passing yards a game, which this is going to be a little bit skewed. Keep in mind, Zach Wilson left a game early, yada, yada, yada. But you look at that adjusted yards per pass attempt, that's going to be the main thing that we want to be looking at. 5.3 adjusted yards per pass attempt. The reason we're using adjusted yards per pass attempt instead of just YPA, instead of just regular yards per pass attempt, is because adjusted yards per pass attempt takes into account touchdowns as well as interceptions. So it's a much better way to evaluate these rookie quarterbacks and their performances this season. So you have a 5.3 adjusted yards per pass attempt for Zach Wilson. That number actually goes down for Trevor Lawrence at 5.2, who had 12 touchdowns and 17 interceptions. He averaged an interception a game this past season. Not Jameis Winston, but still, I mean, right there at the very top of the NFL in interceptions. I mean, a horrendous adjusted yards per pass attempt. He's throwing to Laquan Treadwell, throwing to Jamal Agnew. Every one of these quarterbacks has their excuses on why they failed. And then going over to Justin Fields. Justin Fields actually better than Trevor Lawrence if you're looking at different numbers. I mean, Justin Fields, 7 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, but he does come away with a 5.8 adjusted yards per pass attempt. It's laughable to try to use passing yards per game to judge Justin Fields. That could be a way if I wanted to skew this information and I wanted to come out and say, oh, look at Justin Fields, only averaged 155 passing yards a game. I mean, I could do that, but no, that's not going to be valid because here with Justin Fields, a lot of those games he played, I mean, he was not the full-time starter. He didn't start the entire game, so you can't use passing yards a game against him. And if you're looking at his rushing, which I want to acknowledge this, Justin Fields does have the rushing upside you're not going to find from these other rookie quarterbacks. I mean, this is why if you pull up my own dynasty rankings, well, I mean, I think that Zach Wilson, Justin Fields should be a little bit closer in most people's eyes than they currently are. I am going to put a premium on Justin Fields based on his rushing upside. I think that's completely fair to do at over 400 rushing yards this past season. And clearly, he didn't play the entire year. I think Justin Fields, you can make the argument, he's not going to be Lamar Jackson, not going to be, I mean, Jalen Hurts, but he can easily get to 600 rushing yards in a season, and that is massive. And I don't want to be discounting that at all, which is why I have Justin Fields as our quarterback 14. Like, I have him ahead of Mac Jones. Mac Jones could have also been someone we pull up here. I mean, Mac Jones, a much better rookie season, but I want to give Justin Fields that premium for that rushing upside because I do it with every other rushing quarterback. So I got to be fair here with Justin Fields, where Mac Jones came out, he had a 7.0 adjusted yards per pass attempt, 22 passing touchdowns, 13 interceptions, 223 passing yards a game. Mac Jones clearly had the best rookie season of any of these guys this past year. But like I said, we're going to be unbiased with our evaluation here. And just to let y'all know, we have Justin Fields in the same tier, but a couple spots higher. Now, let's try to project going forward exactly what we are going to be expecting from these rookie quarterbacks. Specifically, the guys that I want to be looking at are the quarterbacks that failed. I want to be looking at Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, and Justin Fields, because those are the players that we really have to be trying to find a pinpoint number on exactly where they should be going in dynasty startup drafts, exactly how you should value them in trade. And keep in mind, this is not a perfect process, and I want to hear your opinion in the comments section because this is a very hard thing to do. It's hard for me to go and double down and say Justin Fields is still overrated in dynasty. So I want to make sure this process is correct. So what I decided to do, and a lot of this has been driven off of the historical research that we have done over on our Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide that comes out every single offseason, but looking at NFL draft capital, indicating job security matters so much with these quarterbacks. So what we have first done is we have taken every quarterback drafted in round 1 since 2010. Okay, so we're looking at a pretty large sample. We're not going to go back to 1995 because back then, NFL completely different. Obviously, I mean, can't be comparing apples to oranges here. So we're going back to 2010. And we are going to be breaking down the quarterbacks into players that were drafted in the top 10 of the NFL draft and players that were drafted in picks 11 through 32. So that's going to be the first division that we are making here, but we're not stopping. So if you're looking at this subsection, we are going to have large samples. You get 23 quarterbacks drafted in the top 10. I mean, I think that's more than enough to be looking at. And then you get 13 quarterbacks drafted outside the top 10, but still in the first round. Now, of course, we can't be evaluating someone like Patrick Mahomes, someone like Lamar Jackson, someone like Tim Tebow, players that didn't start their rookie seasons or started, 3 or 4 games. So we are going to be setting a threshold here to make sure that we are not having any small samples clouding this data. So we are going to be removing any quarterback from these sections that did not start at least 8 games their rookie season. So we are not going to be removing that many quarterbacks from the guys that were drafted in the top 10 because you're drafted in the top 10. You're pretty much starting every single time, especially those guys that were drafted in the top 3. Literally, Trey Lance is the only person that was not. So yeah, if we're looking at this, you got Jake Locker, Jared Goff, and Patrick Mahomes. Those are the guys from the top 10. Didn't start 8 games. We're having to remove them from the sample due to just how small of a year we would be looking at. And then guys that were outside of the top 10, we had to remove significantly more. I mean, we actually were only left with 7 quarterbacks that were drafted outside of the top 10 that ended up playing at least 8 games, and I'm sorry, starting 8 games, because there's a big difference between going in there at the end of the game to kneel it down and starting an entire game. So yeah, we have 7 guys in Christian Ponder, Brandon Weeden, EJ Manuel, Teddy Bridgewater, Dwayne Haskins, Mac Jones, and Justin Fields outside of the top 10 with that criteria. Now, the main thing that we are going to be looking at here is how did these quarterbacks that started enough games their rookie season perform? Because, of course, we can't just say, oh, well, you started enough games, you're going to succeed in the NFL. So we had to draw a mark on a minimum requirement for the adjusted yards per pass attempt metric that we are going to be looking at with these options. Now, I didn't want to be biased here. I didn't want to say, okay, Justin Fields had 5.8, so let's make the mark 5.8. And if anybody was 5.9, 6.0, 6.1, and we say that they are significantly better than Justin Fields and we put them in a different bucket. No, I'm giving Justin Fields and these guys, I don't want to say the benefit of the doubt, but a little bit of wiggle room. So instead of drawing that mark at 5.8 for the adjusted yards per pass attempt, I'm moving it up to 6.1. That's halfway between what Davis Mills and Justin Fields was this past year. So quarterbacks that were able to start 8 games and had an adjusted yards per pass attempt over 6.1, there are going to be busts on this list. This is not going to be the important list to look at because these quarterbacks didn't make it into this group. You have Andrew Luck, Robert Griffin, Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Daniel Jones, Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa, and Justin Herbert. So you have 10 quarterback options that did not make it in this list. Now, what I really want to be looking at are the quarterbacks that started 8 games or more. However, they were not able to hit 6.1 for their adjusted yards per pass attempt their rookie season. And we can look at this group of quarterbacks to just kind of understand where these players fall historically. So you have Sam Bradford. And now we're going to get into exactly how these careers played out in one moment. It's going to be, in my opinion, maybe the main takeaway from this video. But you have Sam Bradford, Blaine Gabbert, Blake Bortles, Mitchell Trubisky, Carson Wentz, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, and Josh Rosen. Now, of course, if we want to go through and add in the quarterbacks that were drafted in the top 10 this past year, started 8 games, did not hit that minimum threshold, you also have Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson with this group. Okay, so I think that we have created a solid list. We'll revisit this list in just one second. Now, if we're going over to quarterbacks that were drafted outside of the top 10 picks, managed to start 8+ games, and we break them down by the same threshold of a 6.1 adjusted yards per pass attempt, we have Teddy Bridgewater and Mac Jones that were able to hit that mark. I mean, quarterbacks that missed it, you had Christian Ponder, Brandon Weeden, EJ Manuel, Dwayne Haskins, and Justin Fields. Now, I'm not saying because Justin Fields is in this group, he's automatically EJ Manuel. He's automatically Dwayne Haskins. He's automatically Brandon Weeden. He's automatically Christian Ponder. Now, of course, you never want your name in that grouping, and I think we've been very fair in how we've broken this down. And even if we go, you know what, Mason, why the hell are you talking about draft capital? I mean, at this point, draft capital doesn't matter. We are past. We already had their rookie season. We'll get to exactly why draft capital matters in a second. But even if we were to remove that criteria and we add in the list of guys that didn't make it, are you still excited to be on the same list of Sam Bradford, Blaine Gabbert, Blake Bortles, Carson Wentz, Mitchell Trubisky, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, Josh Rosen? The only quarterback that was really able to rebound on that list, there's one player, and that's Josh Allen. And that's why I get so frustrated when people come out and they tell me, you know what, Mason, Josh Allen failed his rookie season. Josh Allen failed his, why are we acting like this is a big deal? Well, yeah, completely true. Let's not look at a sample of exactly 15 players and pick the one guy out of that 15. Now, I'm no mathematician, but 1 divided by 50, is that like 7.5? Something along those lines. A 7.5% chance, and act like that is the most likely outcome. I'm not going to say that Justin Fields only has a 7.5% chance of working out. I have him as my quarterback 14 in Dynasty. I mean, it would be reckless for me to assign his probability of panning out at 7.5%. But still, I think these numbers do matter to a certain extent. Now, let's dive in a little bit further and talk about why draft capital matters. And a big reason we were proponents of drafting Trey Lance, drafting Zach Wilson, drafting Trevor Lawrence over Justin Fields. Now, if you were looking at the quarterbacks that failed, that were drafted inside the top 10 draft picks, these are guys that have that job security. They are allowed to fail over and over and over and over again. If we look at the seasons where these quarterbacks started at least 8 games. So if you start 8 games in a year, I think that we can agree that most likely you were the starting quarterback going into the season. You had that dynasty value attached to you. Sam Bradford, who failed to hit this mark, he started 5 years. You have Blaine Gabbert at 4. The perfect example of a quarterback being able to fail over and over and over again if he has that draft capital is Blake Bortles at 5. Blake Bortles, I mean, clearly a very bad quarterback, yet he's starting 5 seasons in the NFL based on the team investment Jacksonville has into it. You have Carson Wentz at 6. That number could still possibly go up. You have Mitchell Trubisky at 4. You have Sam Darnold at 4. Don't know if that number is going to go up, but nonetheless, 4 is still more than enough to prove this point. You have Josh Allen at 4. That number is probably going to go up to 15. And then you have Josh Rosen with 1. Now, Josh Rosen was right on that borderline. He was the number 10 pick overall. But nonetheless, you essentially see a trend. If you were drafted in the top 10 of the NFL draft, even if you are a massive bust in the NFL, even if you are horrible your rookie season, horrible the year after, you're still getting to play out that rookie contract. Mitchell Trubisky's still starting 4 years. Blake Bortles is still starting 5 years. Whereas if you don't have that team investment and you are not that top 10 draft pick, and instead you're in that Josh Rosen, Dwayne Haskins range, I mean, the guys that missed this threshold were drafted outside the top 10. Christian Ponder, he started 3 seasons with 8+ games. Brandon Weeden, 1. EJ Manuel, 1. Dwayne Haskins, 1. We could have thrown Josh Rosen on the list because he's on the borderline. If we want to say Josh Rosen, 1. And then you have Justin Fields. So with Justin Fields, what I have always been worried about is if he fails again this upcoming season, I do not believe that he has the same level of job security based on what we've historically seen as someone like Zach Wilson, as someone like Trevor Lawrence. Now, I still have Justin Fields ranked ahead of Zach Wilson, primarily due to rushing upside, and rushing upside mattering so much more for fantasy than it does from a real life standpoint. But I hope that this video was effective in kind of explaining why I'm still going to be lower on most people than Justin Fields, because if I go over to DLF right now, because one thing I don't want to pull up is the mock drafts we have on this channel and look at where Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence are going, because people already know that I'm lower on those than most, and people know that I spend way too much time talking about this and probably am going to roast them if they ever draft Justin Fields. So in our mock drafts, in our startup drafts, Justin Fields is going to be going lower than most. So let's look at an outside source. Let's look at DLF, not an ad or anything, but I mean, they're just a completely different community. And they have Justin Fields as the quarterback 11 in their ADP currently, ahead of Russell Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson, Matthew Stafford. I'm not saying Justin Fields has a 7.5% chance of working out, but look at the historical data we have. I think that we've been very fair in our evaluation and putting into context Justin Fields in his rookie season. Now, same thing. I'm not making the argument that Trevor Lawrence is some great value here either. Trevor Lawrence going ahead of Deshaun Watson, Matthew Stafford. That shouldn't happen either. I mean, if you're looking at our dynasty rankings on Trevor Lawrence, I have Trevor Lawrence, behind Russell Wilson, behind Matthew Stafford, behind Deshaun Watson. Of course, we have Trevor Lawrence behind Trey Lance, but you know my irrational love with Trey Lance. So it's another big thing I want to focus in on. I'm not saying that Justin Fields is the only overvalued quarterback here. Trevor Lawrence is right there in that same boat. And with Zach Wilson, the dynasty community is reacting appropriately. With Zach Wilson, his ADP has plummeted, as, you'd imagine it should. Zach Wilson's currently sitting down there as the quarterback 19. I mean, directly ahead of Derek Carr, Ryan Tannehill, Kirk Cousins, Carson Wentz. And if you're pulling up our dynasty rankings, I mean, I'm having Zach Wilson exactly at that mark, at quarterback 19, in the same tier as Malik Willis, Tua Tagovailoa, Matt Corral, and Kenny Pickett. Now, one last thing I want to discuss is the situations for these teams going forward. And while I am right there with everybody in the comments section screaming, Matt Nagy was a horrible coach, Matt Nagy didn't know what he was doing, Urban Meyer was a horrible coach, Urban Meyer was the worst coach in the... I'm there with you. They were bad. But as we've discussed time and time again, all these quarterbacks that failed their rookie seasons, if they were drafted in the top 10, going back, someone like Sam Bradford, going back, someone like Blaine Gabbert, Blake Bortles, they were drafted to horrible situations. And a lot of times that head coach was bad and got fired. But was that able to completely turn around the situation? No, because it is so much easier said than done in terms of bringing a good head coach in, bringing a good offensive coordinator in, completely turning a team around. Very rarely does that happen. A more likely scenario is a quarterback gets drafted, is good as hell, and turns the Cincinnati Bengals from the first overall pick into a Super Bowl appearance with Joe Burrow. I mean, with Kyler Murray comes in, I mean, is a fantastic quarterback and turns the Arizona Cardinals from a team getting the first pick overall to a team that, I mean, is making the playoffs. So let's not just place all the blame, even though it should fall, at least a lot of it, on those coaching staffs. They can't shoulder all of it. Don't use them just as the primary scapegoat for why these rookie quarterbacks failed, because historically, we've seen that story play out over and over and over again. And specifically with these teams going forward, in particular, the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Chicago Bears, we have to figure out how this is going to get better. Because right now it looks like Jacksonville, they're going defense in round one by almost all reports. Now, maybe they take that high first-round pick, trade back, and get a couple more assets, and they're able to, say, pick up a Treylon Burks in the middle of the first. Now, of course, a lot would have to happen. A lot would have to change for us to have that assumption. Most likely, this is going to be a team that DJ Chark leaves in free agency. Laviska Shenault's been highly disappointing. So you would assume maybe they get a wide receiver at the beginning of the second. And with that selection, then what are we looking at? We're looking at a wide receiver room of Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault, David Bell. It's not going to be great. And with Chicago, you're having Allen Robinson leave. Allen Robinson failing miserably this past season, but still, the departure is going to hurt. And they don't have their first-round pick. They traded that first-round pick to go get Justin Fields. It's going to be a lot harder to actually go through and fix these quarterback situations than people are making it out to be. I am very worried about Justin Fields, about Trevor Lawrence. Now, I know a lot of people are down there in the comment section going, Mason, you bum, talk about Trey Lance. You got Trey Lance wrong, yada, yada, yada. Completely fair point. I said Trey Lance was guaranteed to start this past season, and I was wrong. But if you look at this historical information, I think that we are making a very high probability bet of Trey Lance starting his rookie year based on, I mean, him really being the only quarterback drafted in the top 3 that wasn't able to start his rookie season over a long duration. And yeah, that doesn't necessarily make me want to move Trey Lance up my rankings, which I haven't, but for some reason, the rest of the Dynasty community has. I've just been high on Trey Lance the entire time, but that goes without saying. I mean, this information that we have doesn't really indicate that not starting your rookie year is going to have you fail. I mean, the quarterbacks that were drafted in the top 10 that didn't start their rookie seasons include only Jake Locker, Jared Goff, and Patrick Mahomes. Not saying Trey Lance is Patrick Mahomes, but I will say if you're looking at the Dynasty price point for Patrick Mahomes, his rookie season, and then after, even though not starting at all, he's the last guy that we saw not start at all his rookie season in this range and then increase in Dynasty value because people knew the situation he was stepping into, and he had a good reason why he didn't start with Alex Smith, I mean, leading this team to the playoffs, and with Jimmy Garoppolo, the 49ers were they were a field goal away from going to the Super Bowl. So it is what it is. Of course, I got a lot of eggs in that basket, but Nonetheless, I really hope that this video was able to help you all out. I know we probably got a lot of people hating on me right now, which is completely warranted, but please let me know if you think I was being unfair. Let me know what you think was wrong with my process, because I think that we are looking at strong data points and we weren't creating unfair cutoffs. So yeah, thank you again. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you have a great day, and yeah, hope we get to see you with the video tomorrow.